Hello guys and welcome to the first video lesson of the week number 2. I want to thank you a lot for all your dedication, your collaboration, your disposition of um, working for this course. I know it's tough, it's difficult, nevertheless I have seen the compromise of many of you. I am recording this video in advance, nevertheless I already received a lot of assignments. Okay, so that means that there are people following the course and interested in getting to know what we can offer over here. Do not worry if you have doubts about the assignments, the answers. I of course provided some revisions or some corrections, comments and stuff, but nevertheless I am going to do another short video, general video about the assignments, and I'm providing corrections and observations for those in order to have everything much clearer. So do not worry, probably after this one I'm going to be uploading another one once I have the answers for all of them. Okay, well, as usual I would like to start this lesson, all the lessons, sharing with you something that I like, or certain things that I may be able to be in touch with. And this time is going to be a poem. Okay, I think it's a really nice one because specifically under this condition of isolation that we have, probably some of you have experienced the need to be in contact with that special someone, or with another person that you miss for whatever reason, right? And I think that this poem is really nice, especially for that. This was written by Carlos Palacio, who is a Colombian sonetist, writer, singer. He's very versatile actually, and I really like what he writes. So as I normally like read all the material that we can in its original language, so I'm going to read this for you in Spanish, that is the original language. Okay, so this is called Cuando te vuelva a ver. Cuando te vuelva a ver yo seré otro. Resulta imperativo que lo sepas. Tú esperando al metódico, al cantante, al que los jesuitas moldearon, al cortés, al paciente, al que aprendió a tratar a las señoritas como a los libros caros, como a los cuadros caros, como a las colecciones de pinceles, o al cristal de Bohemia o al durazno. Te podrías llevar una sorpresa. No digo que el planeta se derrumbe, pero yo seré otro y es preciso que lo sepas. Que sepas, que te pongas el casco, que te blindes. Me lanzaré a tu boca sin preguntas, sin consideraciones ni poemas. Como el suicida al tren, el toro al ruedo, como se lanza al sexo el sordomudo. Y plantaré mi beso cual bandera, como afiche de fiesta o de concierto. Como se siembra un cactus, brutalmente. Y solo luego del trueno y la estampida, después de que los labios se reciten y se cierren los ojos y se abran, solo entonces, no antes, te diré buena tarde. ¿Qué te tomas? ¿Qué te tomas y tal? ¿Cómo estuvo tu día? ¿Caminamos? Really nice, really nice. I think I really like it a lot. I know that many of you over there in the audience may not really like poetry, but I think that this particular poem encompasses a lot of feelings that many people may be feeling right now for different situations. Okay, so that done, let's get into our subject. And well, last session or last week, we were discussing many different things related to Anglo-Saxon period. Okay, so it's interesting. Hopefully you see the evolution, and we will start verifying how every time that we change the period, we are going to hopefully notice different changes in some other things, in the linguistics, in the vocabulary, in the themes, in the role of women, in a lot of different things, in the influence of a foreign language, in geopolitics, geography, etc. Right? So if you are so kind and go to the slide number 18, you will see that the next period that we have is Middle English, right? So Middle English means like medieval, right? Like something that happens in the middle of something. Now, if I ask you, or if I tell you about anything medieval, what can you think of? Like, what is the first that comes to your mind, right? So, what do you think, Stephen, for example? If I say medieval, what do you think? Well, sure, that may be uh, swords, castles, princesses, things like that, right? And hopefully everybody has that general idea of medieval uh, imagery that they have sold us in movies. You wouldn't be that far, yes, if we think that is what comes to your mind. But there are certain other things that we need to analyze in order to, uh, let's say, determine some of the characteristics of medieval or Middle English. Okay, so as you can see over there in the slide, it says that it goes from 1066 to 1500, more or less. And, well, here we have some very general characteristics that we are going to analyze right now. Yes? So, there is something important in here that says that there is a huge influence of French literature, right? So I'm returning one more time to what I mentioned in the first lesson, or well, in the first week, and it's that English is not pure at all, right? There is no such thing as a pure English or exclusive or original. Not really. And actually that can be said of almost not a single language, right? Like most of them are combinations, most of them are let's say mixtures or complements, etc., of other languages or different languages. Especially in English, we're going to find that. So this is a period that is characterized by a lot of influence of French in terms of literature, in terms of language, and some other customs. Okay. Now, let's say that this literature that we're going to find over here, it says the characteristic number 3, contains or frequently has a religiously didactic content, right? So what does it mean? What does it mean that it has a didactic content? Yes? So, for example, Manolo, what do you think about that, my friend? What should be didactic content? And not only, didactic, but religious. Sure, I know you know because you're a teacher, so I'm pretty sure that you know about didactics. Right, very well. That's fine. It means, guys, that by means of literature, we were able to teach religion or to educate people about religion, right? Why do you think was that? Well, the reason is pretty simple, right? And it's that the amount of people who was able to read or write was pretty limited. This was a complete privilege for the upper classes, for almost royalty. Yes, there was not really a middle class. Yeah, it was a society that was separated between the very rich and the really poor. Yes, the closest middle class that you can imagine of maybe are soldiers, people who work for royalty, but they are, even them that are a little bit privileged, are really far away of the monarchs, right? And that takes us to the final part, right? It says it was written for performance at court or festivals. It means that in this period we are going to find a lot of theater, okay? Now, this is where things start getting complicated, right? Because apparently, well, in the previous period we have a lot of orality, for example. And then in this case, in this period, I'm mentioning that we have a lot of theater, right? Now, the thing is that this is not the only period that has theater, right? So when you are going to start comparing and when we are going to start advancing into the different periods and additional characteristics, you are going to have like more possibilities of getting confused. Yes, because we have theater in Renaissance, we have theater in Romanticism, we have theater in modern times, right? So most likely you would require to determine certain characteristics that are very essential. No, but let's say that this is one of those that there was a lot of and plays, and this is related to the second, to the previous component or the previous characteristic. So if people didn't know how to read or write, and they were required like to somehow be educated on religion, yes, mostly what we can think of Catholic religion. It was not exactly the same Catholic religion that we have right now, but it's pretty close to that. So let's summarize it in Judaism or Jewish Christian tradition, right? So if they didn't know how to read or write, they normally required to be pass on this doctrine by means of theater. It is really funny that nowadays theater is seen as a higher art. Yes, and I do agree. I really like theater, and I think that's really fine. And it requires like a different mindset and requires some characteristics in order to be understood and appreciated. Nevertheless, we cannot like get apart from the fact that it was pretty much like television those days. Yes, it was not necessarily for people who were very exquisite in their likes, in their preferences. No, it could be really fine because it was a way somehow, and of course depending on the play and depending on the theater group, it was also a way to control or to indoctrinate people or to tell them what to think somehow. So it's interesting because normally we think of art, literature, books, theater, dance, all these different things as a higher work of art, as a higher manifestation of art, and a way to liberate ourselves. And normally and hopefully it is, yeah. But you have to be aware that sometimes it can work in the opposite way. Yes, it really depends on how you use it. So that's important to know. We have a lot of plays, we have a lot of theater that may be separated. Some of them can be for the popular sector of the population, yes, poor people, so they were just used during fairs, during carnivals, festivals to entertain. Those performances were free or they were really, really cheap, and people were able to get in there. We will see this in the next period, that is Renaissance, and is the period of Shakespeare, and you will see like even an escalation of that process. It gets even more popular. So we have this in terms of the Middle English, and then the figure of God is really important over here. Yes, the figure of a higher power, of a higher authority, and somehow somebody, if you can call body to an ethereal thing, that gives us life, somebody or some power that eventually will judge us, and all these different things, completely changes the mindset of people. So let's rewind a little bit to the previous period. Did they have gods? Sure, they did. But these were terrible gods, right? They were gods that demanded tribute, but they didn't give nothing in return. Yes? So the most that you could ask for a god in Anglo-Saxon period was to have an honorable death. Yes, that was the maximum that you could ask for. Sure, there were a couple of gods for harvests in some cases eventually, especially at the end of the Anglo-Saxon when invaders started like settling down and having a more sedentary life maybe. But normally, these gods were really cruel. These gods were not really the ones that you could expect a lot from. Yes, they did have this legend about Valhalla, that is that if you died in battle and died honorably, so you would like wait, or you will be picked by a Valkyrie that was a really beautiful woman who picked you up from the battlefield and took you to Valhalla. That was the place where people or warriors, let's say, stayed over there in a never-ending feast, like eating and drinking and preparing themselves for the final confrontation against the enemies of the gods. No, that was Ragnarok. That is sort of the apocalypse for for the for the Nordic religions, right? Religions. So I'm telling you this because I want you to compare, right? The promise of behavior of well-behaved people was really different, right? So now we are in the middle English period, and we're going to see how the church and the religious authority push you in order to behave under certain moral conditions, right? So this is, I think that we are all very aware of. Be good, and then you will go to heaven. Be selfless. Donate your money to a certain amount of things. Let's say maintain your somehow sexual good behavior. Do not get exceeded into these. Do not commit immoralities. Do not commit something unthinkable such as homosexuality or bestiality or any of those things, because that's really really bad, and you're going to burn in hell. There were like different connotations of hell, but let's say that the general convention was that one, and that's it. No, so take that into account. The center of the universe in Middle English period was God, the supreme being. So that's why we are going to see a lot of manifestation of praising God in this period. We are going to see paintings about God, about Jesus, about angels, architecture that is monumental in order to sort of demonstrate or imitate, but in a respectful way, the power of God. Yes, somehow being a small, humble reflection of His greatness. And the same happens in literature. We're going to see a lot of different literary pieces that are simply praising God, that are simply praising his works or his goals, and also, of course, we're going to see, let's say, cautionary tales in which the protagonists behave bad, and then in the end they receive a punishment. It's very very moralistic. So those are really really important components over there, right? Well, let's advance into the slide number 19, and you will see a very interesting thing. Now, so we have another invasion. Yeah, follow like the arrows that we have in there, and you will see that there is another invasion, and the territory is once more somehow devastated or controlled or gained by force. That would be a better definition. Now, it says over here that in 1066, more or less, William the Conqueror, that was the Duke of Normandy, that it's roughly the territory that nowadays we know as France. So he invaded the island of Britain, yes, from northern France. Very well. So in this particular period, William the Conqueror was like the most visible figure or military chief, right? So let's think about something, okay? So Oscar Arciniegas, my friend, who was the most visible figure of the previous Anglo-Saxon period, right? Who was the military leader? So, don't remember? Anybody else? Well, I never mentioned that. Yeah, I never mentioned in the previous period like who was the most important military figure. And there is one reason, and it's that there was nobody who was notable enough. Sure, if you look on history, very likely you're going to find guys names of military leaders or somehow, but none that has a relevance, like for example this guy William the Conqueror, right? Well, and that is somehow a way to explain why they were conquered, and it is difficult to think of. No, remember what I mentioned in the previous week? They were really powerful. They were very brute. They valued strength. They valued physical prowess. They delighted on the arts of war. Uh, I mean, they were not somehow a peace-loving people. No, like let's say that there are certain countries that have a very big military power, but they use it only because they have to somehow, or they use it with another purpose, like I don't know, gaining resources or invading people or stealing somehow, uh, natural assets. But war is only a mean. For Anglo-Saxon people, war was a way of life. They fought for the sake of it, and if they died, they didn't care that much. No, of course they would try to survive, but well, they would die and they would go to Valhalla, and that would be fine. Yes. So why do you imagine? Why do you imagine, Michael, that these people died? Or, well, not died, that they were eventually conquered. How do you vanquish a people like that? Hmm? Sure, that is a good idea because they were disorganized. Yes, let's say that there were not ranks, they were not divisions of labor. Everybody dedicated themselves to the fight or something like that, to the struggle, to the battle, right? But they didn't have like a plan. Remember what we mentioned in the previous class, that they didn't think a lot about the future. They sort of lived the present, and that was it. So that is one thing. They didn't really plan their battles, or whenever they had like the victory, what to do with victory, right? Um, so that is, let's say, a serious failure into an army or into organization of people that would like to persevere and continue throughout times. No, so that was one thing. The other thing is that whenever they ran out of enemies, because remember that they were fighting against the Celts that offered minimum resistance. So when the whole territory was completely conquered, they started like fighting each other. Yeah, because they just really like to fight and to spill blood. So like finding all these different subgroups that were fighting among each other, it was relatively easy for the Norman conquerors to somehow vanquish them or defeated them in this case. So basically, that is the reason why the the Anglo-Saxons were defeated somehow. So well, these people arrived over here into this new territory. Many former Anglo-Saxons died. Yes, some others were made into slaves or eventually surrender, right? And that's it, right? So the new conquerors brought a really specific language. If you go to the slide number 20, you will see that the first thing that says is that Normans completely abandoned all Norse language. Yes, so the people who arrived and installed somehow into these new invaded lands, they say no, we're not going to speak this German/English thing that is brutish and without any purpose and without any order. So we are going to speak over here into this new territory our language. Yes, and the language that was adopted was like a proto version or let's say a former version or an ancestor of the modern French. Yes, and it had some combinations or some mixtures of Latin and some other things, right? So let's say that people who arrived over there, well, they spoke this sort of French in there, and well, they installed over there, and they start living somehow in this territory that now is the UK. Well, they started getting out of touch with the original French. Yes, when I say original, again, I cannot really say that word, but the French that was spoken into the original geographical zone started becoming different, mutating, advancing, yes, with the years, and then they sort of had a different language over there in the UK. So the Norman that they spoke in the current territory of the United Kingdom started getting away from the French that they originally spoke. So that was like one first thing, right? Now the thing is that this became the language of the court of royalty. Yes. So if you go please to the slide number 20, you will see that there is a description over here that says that Anglo-Norman, that is how it became to be, let's say, known, was the verbal language of the court, of administration and culture, right? But also that they were able to, or they used to use Latin in order to transcribe, right? So it was a really interesting mixture of verbal French and written Latin for official documents, contracts, things of the church, etc. Right? So that was about royalty and people who had money and who had the power over there now. And unsurprisingly, like people, the peasantry, the people who continued like living their day-to-day lives, and the poor people and the people with low resources, well, they continued knowing or continued speaking what they knew. That was the language of the Anglo-Saxon period, right? This Anglo-Saxon language. Because, well, it's very easy. They didn't have schools, they didn't have anybody to teach them, they didn't have any formal level of education, so they continued like speaking that language. Eventually, both of them mix at some point. You can imagine, like certain words were completely necessary for the day-to-day life, even if they were like mentioning another language in this French Latin thing. So little by little, the Anglo-Norman or the Middle English, let's say, language that was used was a combination between this French, Latin, plus the English of the previous period, plus the Germanic root of such English, right? To that, you can even add a little bit of Gaelic, that was the original language of the Celts, that maybe a few amount of people stay alive in order to share it, tradition from tradition. So it was a complete mixture, of at least 4 or 5 languages plus the dialects, right? So you can imagine that we are only on the second period, and there is already like 5 different combinations of things for the English language. So that's a really interesting thing for me, at least. It's fascinating, right? Well, so that about language. We're going to stop this video over here. Let's say that we know about the invaders. We know about who were they, why they vanquished these former inhabitants. And we know about the language and the combination. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to examine a little bit about specific words, customs, and linguistic features of this French or Anglo-Norman language that they spoke. Okay, so thank you very much. Hope it has been clear, and see you in the next video. Thanks a lot, and hugs. Bye bye.